as it is today, in fact, this will be my first actual talking of this channel. I mean, my first video in my series about traditionalist and nationalist ideology. This episode 1 will be Ruralism versus Urbanism. The most important aspect of our movement, traditionalism, is that we see the superiority of the rural over the urban, the superiority of the farmer over the city worker, and the superiority of the lord and the gentleman over the CEO and merchant. As the often controversial Marshal Peton put it, the earth does not lie. This rings incredibly true for us here in the West, in which truth can be found in rural environments where our traditions are still alive and true conservatism is allowed to reside, whether this be maypole dancing in England, with its roots in old paganism and early British forms of Christianity, or in the vast amount of agricultural vessels throughout the world. Rural areas in the West are, by default, more conservative than the cities. This is not a coincidence, because change in the countryside is not needed, unless, of course, it is for specific reasons which would better the farmer's lifestyle, and better crop yields to prevent starvation. Whilst in cities, in contrast, we see forced change, both demographic and technological, to suit the likes of international capitalists on the right and international socialists and anarchists on the left. The multiculturalist agenda and political correctness which is being pushed on us by the left through the education system and the media, both which show clearly the agenda of the left, which is to force our people into complete change or into utter destruction, and as to adopt a social liberal narrative on life under the threat of being labelled bigoted, racist, sexist or homophobic, or constantly promoting an ideal or that the crassness of urban society through endless streams of anti-family ideas such as feminism, child-free, and the more recent but equally degenerate men going their own way, which all in themselves originate from this beast of modernity. Whilst in contrast, for example, in the Isle of Man, a crown dependency located between Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland, then the practice of birching those considered to be sexual deviants was an accepted practice up until the so-called European Court of Human Rights got their greasy mitts involved. Now this is not actually to benefit the left, for the modern left, just like the modern right, are simply puppets of the globalist elite. Open borders and the dumbing down of society through degenerate pop culture serve to benefit the laissez-faire capitalism by taking away cultures and identity away from the nations so that their people can be more easily enslaved. Tradition and culture, which refuses to throw away its morality and idealism in exchange for a few shiny trinkets, is the enemy of the parasitic international business community, because it will simply not allow for this mercantile class to exist. However, even though for the merchant open borders will, like the snake used to catch rats, it will poison them through the inviting of third world immigrants who will turn against them and vote for more socialist political candidates and those who support bigger government. However, the merchant will simply just go to another country to repeat this process of evil. On the other hand, the feudal lord's power comes from his commitment to the land and to his people, which work for land as he and his son protects them from savage barbarians. The lord feels connection to his land as if it was part of himself. because in some ways it is part of his very own soul, where his life source comes from this, as the life source of the farmers and all those who live upon it and work upon it, as he is their protector and in some ways their farmer for their father. For in pre-Christian times, particularly among the Germanic tribes, the king did perform a sacred role as a priest, which shows the connection between the rural, the monarchical, and of course the spiritual, which are all intertwined, and through an idea of noblesse oblige, which has fortunately is still among us, among the people of Great Britain and Europe. However, it has been slowly killed off. The merchant and the businessman, on the other hand, and do not have this noblesse oblige of the gentry, because a city worker can be thrown away the moment he fails or complains. In general, when talking of power, many argue that hereditary power is unfair, but is it really? Those who inherit power do so naturally without having to delve into any kind of evil, whilst politicians and businessmen will always be ready to abandon their principles and utilize any means of evil, no matter the cost, if it means they will get a promotion or get ahead in life. The aristocrat's duty is to serve God and his king above him, as it is to protect and guide those below him, whilst the businessman's duty is to serve no one other than himself. The gentleman will always need the farmer, and the farmer will always need the gentleman. The farmer cannot be replaced with an imported labourer, because that imported labourer does not share the same ancient knowledge brought down from father and the son in the ways in which the land works. Homogeneity and general acceptance of the hereditary factor is that keeps the rural land safe. Outsiders must be one with the people, and their past loyalties must be cut off if they are to become one with the community. Homogeneity is good, because homogeneous societies are trustworthy ones, because people in general want to be among those like them in terms of attitude and culture. If one goes to London, they will see various clubs for migrants and they will see groups of migrants who, despite residing there for decades, will only hang around their fellow migrants. This is a clear sign that jus sanguinis is a natural way of man and is far superior over the American idea of jus solis, which has contributed to America's original culture, or the founding culture of America, of British descended Protestant people, to be swamped by the likes of Hispanic, Irish Catholic, and continental European, along with African American slave culture, which has swallowed up and has placed shackles among the natural culture of America, which is the Protestant British one, whilst they insist upon the only real benefit of this globalism is that it means cheaper goods. However, this is at the cost of communities and people's jobs. This, of course, has affected urban areas the worst. Former industrial cities such as Detroit and Glasgow, due to neoliberalism, have had their once booming industrial plethora destroyed. Now these two once great cities are hotbeds of socialism, which, rather than naming a solution to the problem of modernism, which would either go back to the land or to revitalize industry, even though both factory owners and workers must make compromises with one another, whether this be restrictions on strikes or more share of the general output of the factory among those who work in it. Now, of course, the industry in itself is not immoral. However, this outsourcing of industry clearly is. The excuse the globalists give us is that it means cheaper goods, However, they forget the notion of quality over quantity as they place more powers into China, which may be acting capitalist in the meantime, but soon, if it ever surpasses the American ways, it will start to spread communist propaganda into the West. Now back to the liberals. The liberal attitude of mer body, mer rules is very much common in cities, as sexual depravity is ripe within them, with people who have so-called alternative sexual practices and lifestyles, such as those who would seek to mutilate themselves in a vain, their genitalia in a vain attempt to be the opposite gender or to be no gender at all, which is, rather than being sectioned as a mental illness, is seen and praised by the people, along with those who do dangerous sex acts such as sodomy and other depraved methods of false pleasure, along with the drug addicts who will probably force themselves into this sexual depravity to fund their drug habits sometime in the future, spreading venereal diseases and immoral behaviour throughout the land. These people do not understand the true joy which comes from family love and patriotism and tradition. These urbanites promote the destructive behaviour through economic and social liberalism, through destruction of the environment, through excessive pollution, destruction of the body through drug use, and destruction of the economy through endless borrowing and spending, combined with excessive usury by foreign merchants, which then leads to using excessive cuts on public services and downscaling of home industries, also that the rich can get cheaper imports from abroad. But whilst this happens, the countryside will live and breathe and shall continue as it has ever done from time immemorial, while cities, like their ancestors Sodom and Gomorrah before them, are destroyed by the wrath of God or by the wrath of nature, whichever one you may wish to believe in.